This episode of the Gamerheads Podcast is brought to you by Seven Bridges Premium Gourmet Yum Yum Sauce. Enhance every bite with our savory blends of flavors, perfect for meats, vegetables, and crispy treats. Whether you're dipping, drizzling, marinating, grilling, roasting, or snacking, Seven Bridges Yum Yum Sauce takes your culinary experience to the next level. Get yours today and make every meal a gourmet delight.
Hi, I'm Celia Schilling from Yacht Club Games.
Hey, this is James from Megacat Studios.
Hey folks, this is Matt, aka Stormageddon from Reignite and the Fun and Games Podcast.
This is Stephanie from the Boss Rush Podcast and the Boss Rush Network.
Hey, this is Mark and Keon from Bunte Avond.
Hey, this is Sebastian with the ProNerdReport.com and the Single Player Experience Podcast.
Hi, this is Chris.
Mike.
And Garrett from Daylight Basement Studio.
Hey, this is Baron J67 from Level 1 Gaming.
Hi, I'm Jacob McCourt from the Left Behind Game Club, Crossplay Conversations, and Video Game Trivia.
Hey, this is Todd Mitchell from Code Right Play.
Salutations, this is Mike Carroll from Stroll Art.
Hey, this is Jeff Moonen from Fun and Games Podcast.
What's good, y'all? This is Adam from Respawn Aimfire.
Hey, this is Patrick from the Backlog Odyssey.
Hey, this is Rune from Runic Codes.
Hi, this is Andrew from Spalato Bros.
Hi, everyone. Jill Grote here from the Indie Informer.
Hello, this is the Crypt Master, and you're listening to Roger You're listening to Roger on the Gamerheads Podcast.
And welcome to another episode of the Gamerheads Podcast. My name is Roger. Along with me this week, I have a very special guest. I have Wesley LeBlanc. He is a games journalist, now PR, right?
Yes,
working in PR. Your games journey is very interesting, so I wanted to have you on, Wesley, and talk about.
Thanks for having me.
Talk about it. So, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your journey in the game industry.
Yeah, so I was in college from like 2013 to 2017, going after an engineering degree.
Really?
Because after high school, I was like, I just want to make a lot of money because I don't know what else to do. That's what I was good at math and science in high school. So I figured, I'd go be an engineer. That sounded fancy. And I was about halfway. No, I was like probably 3/4 the way through that degree. I had about a year and a half left. And there was a class where we had to work together with people. And I remember seeing how excited everybody else was. And I was just not having a good time. And I was like, I think this is going to be the rest of my life if I stay on this track. And it's always been really important to me I don't want to love my work because like ideally nobody is in love with work, but it's something we all have to do, and we spend 8 hours of our day at the minimum doing it. So I'm like, if I'm going to be working for the rest of my life, I hope I enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah.
So I went home to my parents and sat them down and started crying, and they thought I got my girlfriend pregnant or something at the time. And I was like, no, I'm just switching majors from engineering to journalism. And they were like, oh, okay, that's fine. Cool. We thought it was something way worse, which is funny and hilarious in hindsight. And they were super supportive. So I switched majors, and something that kind of led me to that decision was I'd already thought about games journalism because I love games, and I used to love writing before high school. And Greg Miller, now of Kind of Funny, was doing one of his last episodes of IGN's podcast Beyond, and him and Colin at the time were talking about how they were leaving IGN to start Kind of Funny. And I don't remember which one of them said it, but at some point one of them said like, our best advice for getting into this industry is like, just work your ass off. And am I allowed to cuss?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Like work your ass off. And at some point the door is going to creak open a little bit. It'll never be fully open for you. And when that door creaks open, you have to kick the damn thing down. And I remember I like pulled over after hearing that, because I was like, I just felt so motivated. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into games journalism. That door is going to creak open and I'm going to kick it down. And that kind of set me on the path of switching majors and getting a journalism degree, which in hindsight, I don't necessarily think you need to have a journalism degree at all. I think if for my journey, it was helpful, and I was already in college. So I enjoyed college, and I thought a degree would help, and it did help in some respects. But like anyone listening, you don't need to go to college for games journalism. It is a trade you can learn through writing, because that's what you're just going to be doing. But yeah, so I graduated with the journalism degree, and I had already hit the ground running with freelancing, and I kind of just started my freelancing path, which was starting at a small site, writing for free, which again, I would not recommend if you can help it. Like, people are going to do what they want to do. I think there are some sites out there where people are not making money and they're all kind of working together to make a cool site. And I think that's fine. But there are some sites where somebody is making money, but not the writers. And they're the ones who are making the site money. And I think it's very important to be careful with that. Yeah. That said, that's not a lesson I learned at the time. So I wrote for a couple sites that were making good money and I was not getting good money, but I was doe-eyed about the industry and I was so excited to just have my name on something video game related that I did it anyway. Yeah. And for all the faults of that, it did lead to me getting bylines at sites bigger than that. And then I kind of just, every site was a stepping stone. And I eventually started freelancing at IGN, which I think is where I really started to break into this industry and make a name for myself as a writer. And at IGN, the gates just kind of opened. I was like, I'm going to put my everything into this. I was doing guides. I was doing news. I was doing video reviews, features, anything I could do, I would do. And I definitely burnt out because I also had a full-time newspaper reporter job. Oh, wow. And I was basically full-time writing for IGN as a freelancer. And I was also doing videography for a local company, shooting videos and stuff at weddings and whatnot. So I definitely burnt the wick at both ends fast. And I have a moment in my life where I remember being like, I have really messed up. I am burnt out. But that eventually led to me, I think all of the IGN stuff and kind of my entire, a portfolio of years of work landed me an interview at Game Informer. I did not get it. I did not get the job, but they were very kind. Yeah. And then a couple months later, they reached out with an opening and they were like, hey, we remember interviewing you. Are you down? Like, we just want to hire you now. Like, we can skip the interviews. We just interviewed a few months ago. And that was 2021, October 2021. And I forcefully just ended my career with Game Informer in August of 2024 because we got shut down. Yeah. And now I am in games PR because I didn't want to leave the games industry. I wasn't sure about going back into journalism because I'd already kind of been dumped twice, and PR was something I was interested in, kind of look at this industry from a different angle. And I'm enjoying it so far. Still very new in that part of my career, but it's been fun. So that is my very long answer to how I got into games.
No, I appreciate that. And and I'm sorry about the Game Informer thing because that was very heartbreaking. Thanks. So
yeah, I'm past the personal mourning stage. I've landed on my feet. I've got a new job now, but now I'm at the mourning 33 years of history just gone in an instant. It's just a travesty. I mean, so many people loved the idea of getting their name in a print magazine. There's something really special about it. I mean, working for sites is really cool, but having an issue delivered to your mailbox and seeing your name on an article and knowing it's going to be there forever it's a really cool feeling. And I'm sad that there were so many great writers who wanted that and didn't get to do it. Now they won't, at least with Game Informer.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels like with Game Informer, it felt like, up to the first time where they started cutting staff with the layoffs. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. But it really felt like that was the magazine that was like the flagship that like they're a staple. They're a staple in the industry. And when it closed and just so suddenly without any kind of anything, just not even letting people say goodbye, like that was just weird and made me stop and pause about this industry. So it's crazy.
It's unfortunately like not the most, it sucks a lot, but like it's par for the course for what the games industry is going with across all aspects, not just like journalism, but at Game Informer this entire year, it felt like every other day I was writing a story about a game studio experiencing layoffs. It's a rough period. I'm hopeful that I still think this year has some rough hits coming, but I'm hopeful that 2025 is going to be kind of a recovery point. I hope so, at least, because I don't know if this industry survives another 2024 in terms of cuts.
This was not something that I had on our list here, but just look at Concord and the fact that it was out for 2 weeks, and then they didn't say completely that they're shutting down. They said we're taking it off and we'll maybe come back. We're not really sure what that means, but
it's a tough I don't know. It's a tough sell. It's really, it's been interesting watching from the outside. I mean, I probably would have been writing all kinds of news and think pieces about this, but like, yeah, I think ultimately it's just so heartbreaking. These people put so much of their life into a game, and it didn't even live for more than 14 days. And theoretically, outside of their decision, like I imagine that's a PlayStation idea to pull the plug. And it's just heartbreaking. I can't imagine putting years of my life into something and then it just disappearing after 2 weeks.
2 weeks. It's brutal. That's insane.
Yeah.
So I mean, let's talk about some positive stuff.
yeah. Sorry to start the show.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Looking back, what were some of your key moments that shaped your career, would you say?
Yeah, I think getting a journalism degree was a big moment that like shaped me, because the final year especially I was just a journalist. I was working for the college newspaper. I was interning at a newspaper that I would later go on to write full time for. I was freelancing with some papers downtown covering like local Florida business. I was really sharpening my teeth on an industry I didn't care about, to be honest. Like I wanted to cover games, and I had to go do, I was going to government meetings and talking to realtors and all this stuff, but it taught me to find the interesting part of a story that I might otherwise find to be boring, and write for an audience that is looking for that kind of story. And I think that really helped a lot. It's lessons I learned that I carried with me throughout my career. I think landing my first freelance gig at IGN was a big one. I remember it. I remember getting the email to this day. It was a guides pitch they wanted me to do tips and tricks for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019. It was a beta, and they asked me to do like 20 to 30 tips and tricks, but it wasn't a test, but in my head, I'm like, this is my first impression with them. I need to go hard. So I turned in a piece with 100 tips and tricks. And they were super impressed, and I immediately got more work. And I kind of, that's what kickstarted my journey into freelancing with IGN, which I think was a big part of, it's kind of where I sharpened my teeth with games journalism before going, full time at Game Informer. And then obviously getting a job at Game Informer was a big deal. The biggest deal. That's the best job I've ever had. It was a blast. I loved everyone there. I got to do so many amazing things. If I had to pick one moment in Game Informer that probably I'll never forget, that kind of not even shaped, it's just the coolest. It was just a cool ass moment, was our Final Fantasy 16 cover. Because I got to go to Japan for the first time. I was solo on that trip, which was very scary because we usually send multiple people, but for whatever reason, I had to go solo. I was talking to industry legends like Naoki Yoshida. It was a brand new Final Fantasy. It's probably my favorite game franchise of all time. It was just so many amazing things. And I was allowed to, I took some personal time and flew out there early to explore Japan for a couple days. And yeah, it was just like, that was the moment where I was like, this feels so right. This is what I've been trying to do for so long. And it really felt like a breakthrough moment. And yeah, it was one of my fondest memories of life, honestly.
Wow. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
How did your time at Game Informer influence your perspective on the industry?
So it like two ways. I really focused on news there because that's kind of my background. So I was doing a lot of online news. I would start my shift a couple hours before most of them because I was on the East Coast and a lot of them were in Central. And so in my mornings, I would just, populate the site with news. And so I was writing a lot of stuff, often good, often bad. Especially this last year, kind of my plan B after journalism was always like game dev or PR. And after like a couple months of this year, I was like, I think PR is my next move. I don't think I'm going into game dev. I'm a little scared of what game dev has become.
Yeah.
Just having written story after story of these talented teams just disappearing because an executive was like, I need our shareholder interests to look. I got to make them happy. And so we're going to cut hundreds of people's jobs and ruin their lives. And so I got really jaded there for a bit, but every time I would visit a studio and talk to devs, it was very motivating. And just to see that kind of passion and the amount of work and teamwork that goes into making a game, big and small, it's really inspiring. It's, like I do want to go do something with game dev one day, maybe after this industry gets a little more stable. But yeah, it's it's just incredible to see people, masters of their craft, build these games. I remember I was at BioWare earlier this summer to check out Dragon Age: The Veilguard, and I was the first person outside the studio to see it. And just talking with the team leads, they were so excited, and it's like infectious. It's hard not to be excited.
Yeah.
And we look at things with the critical lens and the journalism side, but the video game lover in me is just so cool. It's like magic. I don't understand how they do it. And then I'm watching something, and now it's one of my most anticipated games this year. That's the magic of games journalism, I think, is getting a behind the scenes look at games in a way you might not otherwise. So yeah, I think it's easy to get a little jaded of games if you really focus on the news, because there's been a lot of bad news this year. But over my 3 years at Game Informer, it's I think more than anything, I've just been inspired by the people making these games I love. It's art, it's craft, it's technical, it's all kinds of things rolled into one, and somehow it creates these experiences that touch us in ways people might not even imagine. Like I love video games, and watching the people make them it was a treat of Game Informer.
Yeah, that's awesome. Speaking of Game Informer, so it's crazy to me that you said you've been there for 3 years, because it feels like you've been there forever, because like just because you just I mean, and I've heard this from other people, but just like it's part of a family, and you just I don't know. I'm a fan of what you write. I'm a fan of when you're on podcasts as well. Like you just do really good work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And it's just weird to me when you say 3 years, because it just feels like you just were part of the family for a long time. But you unfortunately were part of an unusual situation where you were laid off from Game Informer, right? And then you were brought back. And unfortunately, then of course, when the closure happened, the layoff happened again. But can you talk a little bit about that when you decided to go back? Like, how did you handle that decision going back, knowing that you just got laid off? Like that must have been really scary.
Yeah, it was definitely tough. It was a lot of thoughts, I think. And this is me and Jill Grote, who now runs Indie Informer, which is an awesome site covering indie games. Love her. She's amazing. She ended up quitting shortly after the layoffs, because she was like, she wasn't laid off, but she was like, I don't want my time at this site I love to end in a layoff. It's heartbreaking. So I'm going to leave now on good terms, empowered, on my own. And that opened up a position for me. And it was kind of just like a handoff, a situation where, the position was open, and my former boss hit me up and was like, hey, we've got a new position open. Do you want it? And I didn't even really think about it too hard. It was just yes, because, a week before I was happy, loving that job, and I didn't want it to be over. And it sucked the way that went down. I mean, I got laid off on my birthday, which is just brutal.
Yeah.
But like, I still had stories I wanted to write. I still had things I wanted to do. I was in the middle of my first ever cover story, like literally like halfway through writing it when I got laid off. Like I still had so much I wanted to do with Game Informer. That was only 9 months in. And so when the opportunity came to come back, it was a very easy yes for me to like tell my boss, yes, I'm coming back. The hard part, I think, was like the optics of it all. There's like one aspect of it. Embarrassment's not the right word, but it's like I was publicly dumped, by a girlfriend, and then I'm like crawling back to her a couple days later, and I don't have an ego in the way that like I was like, oh, I can't do that. It was just, it's weird seeing people write about Game Informer layoffs and my colleagues who are also laid off, and be on podcasts and listen to some of my favorite podcasts, and they're talking about the layoffs, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm agreeing with all their points. It is scary. It sucks I was laid off, and then I'm going to go back to that site a week later. It was really strange, but I didn't care. I love that team so much. I still do. I think we were a power horse of creativity and amazing work. And there was also like to be frank aspect of it. Like I needed a job because I needed to pay bills. And when the option is like, hey, do you just want your old job back? It was an easy yes. So I think returning was easy. It was more so just like the optics of it were very weird. Yeah, most people, well, not most people, but outside of games, like, people get laid off and it happens. It's a private personal affair and it sucks a lot. But like in games, when people are laid off, it's being covered by sites and people are tweeting about it and all kind of things. So it's a really weird situation to go through. I spent many therapy sessions talking to my therapist about it. And we talked about how I would handle the second time, because the first time broke my heart. I was crying on the phone with my boss. He was crying with me. Like it was a devastating situation. And I was like, I can't let ultimately work have this much power over like my emotions. And I loved what I did, but I needed to like reassess where work was placed in my life. And that's what I worked on in therapy was, when this happens again, if it happens again, I need to be able to handle it better in stride. And I think I did this past time. It was still heartbreaking, but it wasn't like, I wasn't like bawling my eyes out. I wanted to internally, but I needed to like, I had to go get another job and I had to get my bills paid, and I wanted to focus on the positive memories of everything and not let the terrible situation kind of ruin what I'd worked so hard on for 3 years. But yeah, it was an easy decision to go back. Just a weird decision, like a weird, easy decision, weird situation.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, you kind of alluded to this already, but do you think that because you went through it the first time, just your shift in mindset was a little bit easier the second time?
Yeah, I think so. After getting laid off once, it's like a system shock. Like, oh, you can get laid off at jobs, even if it's a job you love and pour your everything into, you can still get laid off. And so it kind of reworked my brain to understand that moving forward, any job I have, the people, my bosses at Game Informer, my colleagues, they all loved me as much as I loved them, but like the work will never love you as much as you might love it. And so I had to reassess that relationship. Because, one day, and at the end of the day, you're just a number at any company you work for, and like, they'll do what they got to do. And some companies aren't that way necessarily. I mean, I don't want to paint like such a grim picture of companies, but, and that's what it is. They have to make money, and sometimes layoffs happen so that companies can make money, and it sucks that people are at the end of that. So it was really about reassessing. I loved my work. I loved my colleagues. I loved the team I worked with. I loved what we put out every month, but I needed to love the actual job less, so that when the job decided to stop loving me as much, I could handle it better. And I think I did this past time.
Yeah. How do you see games journalism evolving then over the next few years with what we're seeing?
Yeah, it's weird. I think it's kind of the same thing I would have said years ago, but just even more so now. I mean, going into this industry, I could see that it's really just a bunch of key players, like not keys, not the right word, massive players. You got your IGNs, your GameSpots, Kotaku, Polygon. They're at the top and they're massive. And you're like, basically, we're never going to be able to build something to compete with them. And even Game Informer, we were up there. Obviously, we had a magazine and stuff, so we were a little different. But part of like the old guard, I guess, is what you might call it, like the sites that have been around a long time. Like if you start a new site, you're probably not going to be able to compete with IGN. You just can't. They're acquiring new companies. They have massive, amazing teams of talented writers and video editors and all kind of stuff. And that's been the case for a while. So I think the gap between these sites at the top and then smaller sites is just going to get bigger, which is why I think smaller sites really need to focus on like what makes them unique instead of, I don't think any small site should be trying to be an IGN. You shouldn't be trying to be a GameSpot or Kotaku. You need to find what makes you unique from those sites, what makes you unique in this industry where there's hundreds of sites you can go read, and focus in on that. And I think like Jill, for example, at Indie Informer, she kind of, is using the name Indie Informer, which calls back to Game Informer, but she focuses exclusively on indies. And I think she's found a really good niche with that, and indies love her, and PR wants to talk to her because she is highlighting indies in a unique way and doing great work. And I think it's a really good example of finding a part of games journalism that you enjoy and focusing on that, as opposed to like trying to be this all-encompassing force. And I think that applies to anyone breaking in. Like, I think find those sites and work for those sites, or or start a YouTube channel and focus on your video editing skills, or focus on your like hosting and prompt skills on a screen. Yeah, I think it's just about, no one can compete with those massive sites. Like there's just so much that they put into their sites, and that so much that comes out. Like, so don't try, like do your own thing, find your niche in this industry. And I think that was the case 7 years ago when I joined games journalism. And I think that's the case even more so now, as sites like Game Informer continue to disappear and sites like IGN still exist. And I love IGN. IGN's great. I obviously work with a lot of people there. They put out some amazing work. They just have so many people doing, not even so many people. You would think for a site as big as IGN, they have thousands, but it's not the case in games journalism. But like comparatively, they're doing so much. And I think it'd be silly to try to be the next IGN. Try to be the next you, the next whatever you want to be. That's what you got to try to be, I think.
Yeah. That's good advice. Also, congratulations too, because you are also going to be contributing to the Indie Informer as well. So
yes, that's awesome. Very excited to be doing that with some of my former colleagues from Game Informer, like Marcus and Charles, and it's going to be really cool. Yeah,
Jill's been on this podcast like 100 times. I don't know, we lost track, but
she's awesome.
But she's awesome. Because my last question here for you, what advice would you give someone that is looking to get into the gaming industry, whether it be PR or journalism? What advice would you give to them?
I think so, kind of what I just said, where you need to find like your niche. And I think that's a good place to start, and to find something that makes you stand out. I do still think all the things you've probably heard before apply, where like you can't just be a good writer. You need to know how to talk on a microphone. You need to know how to be in front of a camera. You need to know how to edit video. You got to know how to do it all, and you know how to do interviews with developers and people. And you can't just be good at one thing anymore. That's not what sites are looking for. What they're looking for, multimedia journalists is the term that we were called in college. But I think also, like, joining games journalism specifically, like, you really need to take a hard look at the industry and determine like if you're willing to do it. I think a big, there's a lot of heartbreak in it. I've been through 2 layoffs, and I wasn't like naive to the fact that could happen. I think you need to go in knowing what this industry's been through and where it might be going, and the ups and downs, and be prepared for that. And truly, 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 like, you got to love this. You got to love what it is, because we're not getting rich on games journalism at all. Like, it's not about
you don't get paid for the reviews. What?
Yeah, no, believe it or not, in my 3 years of Game Informer, not even an offer for a paid review. It literally does not happen. I know people think it does, but like, I would review a game, and then I would say, this is what I think about it. And then it was just all me. Shocking. Crazy. It's a wild thought in this day. Somehow it's becoming a wilder thought in 2024. I sometimes I'm like, oh, we're moving past that. People are starting to understand that doesn't happen. And then I see like people complaining that Astrobot has a 94 on Metacritic instead of a 90. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
The amount of, kind of a tangent, but something I always enjoyed was the amount of arguing that happens over scores. When I wrote reviews, the score was like literally never on my mind. I would write my review, I would write my thoughts, and then I would just go look at Game Informer's review scale and find out where my written thoughts match best. It wasn't even like, oh, I'm going to write a 9 out of 10 review. I would just write what I thought. And then when I was happy and this is all my thoughts out on the page, I'm like, okay, this fits the 9 out of 10, or this fits the 3 out of 10. Like, I put so little thought into these scores in that regard. I mean, I know scores are important, but it was never like whatever people think scores are. And when I say people, it's like, the people that are asshats about scores, not the majority of gamers who are cool and chill. But yeah, I think like if you're going, and this is kind of back to what Greg and them said on Podcast Beyond, like, the door is never going to be fully open. You have to kick it down the second somebody opens it a little bit. And that's something I really carried with me, was that you're never going to be just like handed the opportunity. You really have to go out and get it and work hard for it. And unfortunately, there's probably a little bit of luck involved too, which sucks to say, but like, I don't know. I'm not going to say that I 100% am the reason why I got to where I was. I think it's time and place. There's all kind of things that go into it, and luck's one of them. But you really got to love it, because if you don't, there are so many people out there who are going to love it more than you, who are going to put their everything into it. That will get ahead of you. That will be noticed before you, because they're putting more into this. Now I think there's a balance to be made there. I definitely had, I remember a specific year of my life where I was just going way too hard. I had a full-time newspaper job. I had a video editor job. I was freelancing. I probably had 16-hour work days daily, like even on weekends. I don't recommend doing that. It's not necessary. Your editors don't want that, especially these days. Like, editors are so great, and like, just talk with them. Tell them you need more time. Don't kill yourself to get a review done. But yeah, I think truly, as more and more time goes by, you really have to love this industry, because it's brutal, and it's going to take a lot of dedication and a lot of your mind share and a lot of your effort to be what you want it to be. And I think it's okay to recognize what's going on in the industry and see layoffs and stuff and be like, it's not for me. I think I could be as passionate as I am about games journalism. And even I've decided, like, I think I need to step away from games journalism. It's just, if you don't want to put yourself through the possibility of layoffs or something, like, it's okay. Just cover games as a hobby, or write about it on your own site or with some buddies, and do podcasts with your friends, and just make it enjoyable. I think that's when games journalism is at its best, is when you're enjoying it, and games are too fun to, ruin your 10 hours a day where the sun's out. Like, have a good time with it. And I think I've rambled enough about advice getting in, but I think
that was awesome.
One other thing too, as I mentioned earlier, like, I don't think you need to go to college, and you absolutely don't. But like, if you're not going to go to college for games journalism, which for me was a good networking tool and a good way to like get stuff on my portfolio and intern at newspapers and stuff and work with editors. If you're not going to do that, you've got to write your ass off. Like, just write all the time and edit videos and host and do all the things. Like, you won't just wake up one day good at it. You have to get good at it, and you'll probably suck when you start. I know I was awful. Even looking back at some of my freelance pieces before Game Informer, I'm like, oh my, what is this dude writing about? I thought I was, it's so clear I had like a thesaurus open and was just trying to find like fancy, cool words and getting lost in that, as opposed to like the story. But yeah, like, just write, like, start a Medium blog or start a site with your friends, and don't worry about trying to make money or this or that. Like, just focus on the craft and look at what your favorite writers are doing. Don't, obviously don't, plagiarize their work, but like, okay, how are they setting up leads? Why are their headlines interesting to me? What can I do to like, what is in their stories that grab me, and how can I apply that to my own work? I think it's really important to do that. And also, this is obvious, but I had to learn the lesson, like, read a lot of stories. If you want to be a reporter, read reporter stories. If you want to be a video editor, watch a ton of videos. If you want to be a podcast host, listen to your favorite podcasts and find out why those hosts are good. Like, none of this just comes naturally. It's all, I don't know. Some people are probably great naturally. It wasn't me. I had to work for every aspect of my career. And I think it's an all-encompassing holistic approach. Like, read, write, edit video, do podcasts, talk to yourself out loud, read your stories out loud. There's so much to do, and there's so many great resources to tap into.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good advice. And I mean, like, Gamerheads, we don't make money. So, but we do it for fun, right? So
yeah, and you probably enjoy it a lot more than some sites who are making money. Because like, sometimes money is not, obviously we'd all love to make a lot of money, but how awesome that you get to write and talk and do videos about games, and you don't have to worry about maybe laying off people because you don't have money to support them anyway. Otherwise.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, Wesley, before we head out, how can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at LeBlanc's. That's at LeBlancWes. That's like my main social media site. I've been using it a little less because Twitter has become obviously not great since Elon Musk purchased it. But it's still my main networking tool, and unfortunately, it's like the main heartbeat networking tool of the games industry in general.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's where I'm at mostly. I'm on Instagram at I_am_Wesley. I used to post a lot about my travels because I traveled a lot for Game Informer, but that's not happening anymore. I'm looking forward to just kind of taking it chill at home. And yeah, if you're in games media or anything, we can get in touch and I can start sending you like press releases and stuff because now I'm on the PR side of things, which is fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Wesley, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. I really enjoyed this chat and hearing your thoughts on your journey, and it was really nice chatting with you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm glad I was able to be here. This was fun to talk about, and I appreciate you letting me come on here and ramble about games journalism. I'll probably be doing that till the day I die, even if I'm not in it anymore. I love games journalism, even though sometimes it doesn't love me back.
And listeners, if you like what you hear, leave us a review. We want to hear what you have to say about the show. Until next week, everyone, stay safe and game on. Bye.
Bye.